Ambassador Zefkar had witnessed the fall of empires. He had seen species reduced to cosmic dust, watched as entire civilizations were erased from existence with clinical precision. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic service across the Galactic Council, he thought he had seen every form of warfare the universe could offer. He was wrong. The day the humans said no more was the day the galaxy learned what true terror looked like. It wasn't their weapons that made the stars tremble. It was the look in their eyes when they decided that peace through submission was no longer an option. When humanity stopped asking for mercy and started demanding justice, even the oldest predator species began to understand why Earth had survived every catastrophe the universe had thrown at it. What follows is the account of how a species dismissed as soft diplomats became the nightmare that haunts every military strategist in known space. This is the story of why, when humans march to battle, even the darkness between stars holds its breath. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at 0400 Standard Time, when most species were in their rest cycles. Ambassador Zefkar of the Vorthak Empire arrived to find the massive chamber already filled with representatives from across known space. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric requirements, creating a barely breathable soup that served no one well. At the center of the circular chamber, the holographic display showed a sight that had shaken the foundations of galactic politics. The Xerian military collective, the most feared fighting force in the galaxy, lay in ruins. 17 star systems, all military strongholds, reduced to floating debris. The casualty reports were staggering. Over 40 billion Xerian warriors dead in what appeared to be a coordinated assault lasting less than 72 hours. The preliminary investigation is complete, announced Council Speaker Maltuva, her 6 arms gesturing towards the display. The perpetrators have been identified. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of universal translators seemed muted. Everyone knew the Xerian collective had been the enforcers of galactic order for over 2,000 years. Their military might was so overwhelming that most conflicts ended the moment they deployed their fleets. To destroy them would require an alliance of at least 50 major powers, and such an alliance would have been impossible to hide. The attack was carried out by a single species, Maltuva continued. Humans. The silence shattered. Dozens of species erupted in their various forms of laughter, disbelief, and outrage. The Krathan delegate's serpentine form coiled in amusement, while the crystalline Gelnari chimed in harmonic mockery. Only a few representatives remained quiet, studying the data with growing unease. Zethkar was among them. He had worked with humans for the past 50 years, watching their rapid integration into galactic society. They were excellent diplomats, skilled negotiators, and remarkably adaptable. But warriors? The humans barely had a unified planetary government when they achieved faster-than-light travel. Their military technology was considered quaint by galactic standards. "This is impossible," declared General Krextel of the Hegemony Defense Force, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Humans have perhaps 10,000 combat vessels. The Xerion collective fields 12 million. The mathematics alone." "The mathematics," interrupted Dr. Sarah Chen, the human representative, "apparently didn't account for human tactical doctrine." All attention focused on the small figure at the human delegation station. Dr. Chen stood barely 5 feet tall, her graying hair pulled back in a simple knot. She wore no ceremonial armor, no status symbols of rank or power. In a chamber filled with beings bred for intimidation, she looked utterly ordinary. "Ambassador Chen," Maltuva's voice carried a warning tone. "The evidence clearly shows human energy signatures, human ship designs, human tactical patterns. We require an explanation." "The explanation is simple," Chen replied, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "The Xerian collective has been systematically enslaving human colonies for the past 6 months. They ignored our diplomatic protests, dismissed our requests for mediation, and yesterday they began harvesting human children for their biological enhancement programs."
The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different.
Several species began urgent consultations with their military advisors. The Xerian practice of using conquered populations for their enhancement programs was well known but carefully ignored by the galactic community. It was the price of peace. "So we stopped asking nicely," Chen continued, as if discussing trade negotiations. "Admiral Martinez sends his regards, along with this." The holographic display changed, showing a recording from one of the destroyed Xerian strongholds. The viewpoint was clearly from a security camera on a Xerian command station. Space around the station appeared empty, peaceful. Then, without warning, reality seemed to tear itself apart. Ships materialized from nowhere, not through normal faster-than-light transit, But as if they had been hiding in the space between atoms, they moved unlike any vessels in known technology, flowing around incoming fire like water, striking with precision that defied physics, then vanishing before counterattacks could be launched. But it wasn't the technology that made Zethkar's blood run cold. It was the coordination. The hundreds of human ships moved as a single organism, each action perfectly timed to support every other action. There was no hesitation, no moment of consideration for mercy or negotiation. They had come to kill, and they executed their task with a precision that spoke of careful planning and absolute commitment. The Xerian defenders, warriors who had conquered star systems with their ferocity, died without landing a single effective blow. "Stealth technology," whispered Commander Beltard of the Solar Defense Corps. "But how?" "Our sensors show nothing that advanced in human space." Chen smiled, and for the first time, Zethkar noticed something cold in her expression. "Commander, you're making the same mistake everyone else has made. You're assuming you know what human technology looks like." "Explain," demanded Malthuva. "For 50 years, we've been the junior members of this community. We've listened, learned, and adapted. You've seen us build ships using your designs, fight using your tactics, even organize our governments based on your models. You thought you understood us." Chen activated her personal display, showing a series of technical specifications that made several delegates gasp. "What you didn't realize is that we weren't copying your methods. We were learning your weaknesses. Every technology you showed us, we found ways to counter. Every tactical doctrine you shared, we developed responses. Every time you dismissed us as primitive, we grew stronger. The specifications showed weapons that somehow used a target's own energy against it, armor that became stronger under fire, and propulsion systems that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics." "This is impossible," repeated General Crackstell, but his voice lacked conviction. "General, your people have been fighting the same way for 10,000 years. Honor, glory, intimidation. Very impressive. But humans learned warfare in a different school." Chen's display changed again, showing historical footage from Earth. "We perfected killing each other for millennia before we reached the stars. We learned that the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to follow the rules." Zethkar studied the tactical readouts and felt a growing chill. Human military doctrine didn't seem to recognize concepts like acceptable losses or honorable combat. Every strategy was designed for total victory through total destruction of the enemy's capacity to fight. "The Xerion Collective believed their reputation would protect them," Chen continued. "They thought we would negotiate, compromise, accept some losses to maintain galactic stability. They were wrong. You've started a war that could consume the galaxy," accused Senator Drajek of the Core Worlds Alliance. "No, Senator, we've ended one." Chen's voice hardened. "The Xerion Collective has been at war with every free species in the galaxy for 2,000 years. You've just been paying tribute instead of fighting back. That ends now." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Order had been built on fear of the Xerion Collective. With them gone, every relationship, every treaty, every balance of power was suddenly meaningless. "What do you want?" asked Malthuva finally. "The same thing we've always wanted. To be left alone to develop in peace. The difference is, now we have the ability to ensure our peace." Chen began gathering her materials. "The human delegation will be returning to Earth to report these proceedings to our government. We suggest that all species currently engaged in aggressive expansion take time to reconsider their policies." As the human delegation prepared to leave, Zethkar found himself studying the other representatives. Fear was spreading through the chamber like a virus. Species that had never questioned their military superiority were suddenly calculating whether they could survive human attention. "Ambassador Chen," called Zethkar as she passed his station. "The humans who carried out this attack, were they your best warriors?" Chen paused, considering her answer. "Ambassador, every human who participated in this operation volunteered, but they weren't warriors. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, parents, people who just wanted to live in peace. If they weren't your warriors, then we're our warriors?" Chen's smile was gentle, almost maternal. "Ambassador, our warriors are still at home, hoping they never have to leave Earth." As the human delegation departed, Zethkar realized that everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization had just changed. The humans hadn't revealed their military might to intimidate or conquer. They had revealed it to send a message: leave us alone, or discover what humans could do when they stopped pretending to be civilized. The emergency session continued for 18 hours as delegates tried to process the implications. By the time it ended, 7 major powers had already dispatched diplomatic missions to Earth, and 12 others had begun immediate military reviews of their expansion policies. But Zethkar knew it was too late for half measures. The humans had shown the galaxy something that would reshape civilization itself. They had proven that the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the biggest guns or the most fearsome reputation. The most dangerous enemy was the one who had been quietly watching, learning, and preparing while everyone else assumed they understood the rules of the game. The age of intimidation was over. The age of human diplomacy had begun. 3 weeks after the emergency session, Ambassador Zethkar found himself aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, approaching the Sol system for the first time in his career. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was making this journey in a ship designed by humans, using technology they had supposedly learned from the galactic community. The journey from the galactic core to Earth's system normally took 6 days through established hyperspace routes. The human pilot, a quiet woman named Commander Torres, had made the trip in 4 days, using routes that didn't appear on any galactic navigation charts. When Zethkar asked about the shortcuts, Torres simply explained that humans had been exploring alternative pathways for decades. Everything about this mission felt wrong. Zethkar had volunteered to lead the investigation into the Zirion incident, partly out of professional duty, but mostly because he needed to understand how thoroughly he had misjudged humanity. His security clearance gave him access to classified reports from across the galaxy, and the picture they painted was increasingly disturbing. The attack on the Zirion Collective hadn't been an isolated incident. Over the past 5 years, 17 different aggressive species had suffered mysterious equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and strategic defeats that seemed impossible given their technological advantages. In every case, the failures had been attributed to various causes: solar flares, computer viruses, freak accidents. But the pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Every species that had targeted human colonies or trade routes had experienced setbacks. The Caliph Empire lost 3 entire fleets to navigation errors after they began raiding human shipping. The Mordak Confederacy's military networks crashed system-wide just as they launched an invasion of a human research station. The Gex Dominion's leadership fell to a political uprising days after they announced plans to claim human worlds. The humans had been fighting a shadow war across the galaxy for years, and nobody had realized it. Approaching Earth orbit, announced Commander Torres. The Council delegation is cleared for direct surface transport to Geneva. Zethkar pressed against the viewport and felt his breath catch. He had seen Earth in holographic displays, but seeing it directly was different. The planet looked impossibly vibrant compared to most worlds. Swirling white clouds, deep blue oceans, and patches of green that spoke of a biosphere in perfect balance. It looked like a garden world, the kind of paradise that species spent millennia trying to create. More disturbing were the orbital installations. Official records showed a few dozen space stations and monitoring satellites. Zethkar's enhanced sensors detected at least 300 artificial structures, many of them clearly military in nature. Several appeared to be using technology that his instruments couldn't identify. Impressive, isn't it? Torres said, noticing his attention. We like to keep our defenses subtle. Subtle wasn't the word Zethkar would have chosen. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, he counted weapons emplacements that could have held off a full battle fleet. They were disguised as commercial facilities, research stations, even recreational areas, but the energy signatures were unmistakable. The humans had turned their entire star system into a fortress, and they had done it so quietly that galactic intelligence services had noticed nothing. The Council delegation was met at Geneva Spaceport by Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's Director of Interstellar Relations. She was younger than Zethkar had expected, perhaps 40 Earth years, with dark hair and the kind of intense focus that he associated with military planners rather than diplomats. Ambassador Zethkar, welcome to Earth. I trust your journey was comfortable? Very much so, Director. I appreciate humanity's hospitality in this difficult time. Difficult times often reveal important truths, Vasquez replied as she led them toward a waiting transport. I believe you'll find this visit enlightening. The transport was another revelation. It moved without any visible propulsion system, floating silently above the ground at speeds that should have generated significant wind resistance. When Zethkar commented on the technology, Vasquez explained that humans had developed alternative approaches to most standard technologies. Geneva itself was unlike any city Zethkar had visited on other worlds. Instead of the towering monuments to power that most advanced species preferred, human architecture seemed designed to blend with the natural environment. Buildings grew from the landscape like plants, and the population moved through the city with an efficiency that spoke of careful planning rather than rigid control. But it was the people that truly unsettled him. He had expected to see signs of a society mobilized for war, soldiers, weapons, the harsh expressions of a species preparing for conflict. Instead, he saw children playing in parks, artists displaying their work, couples walking hand in hand through gardens that belonged in a paradise world. These were the people who had destroyed the Zirian Collective without apparent effort. "You seem puzzled, Ambassador," Vasquez observed as they approached the Council of Nations building. "I confess, Director, I expected to see a more militarized society. Your people just fought the most advanced military force in the galaxy." "No, Ambassador, our people just defended their homes and families." Vasquez paused at the building's entrance. "There's a difference." Inside, Zethkar met with representatives from Earth's major governments. They were a diverse group, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds, but all sharing that same focused intensity he had noticed in Vasquez. These weren't the soft diplomats that galactic intelligence had described. These were strategists who had been planning for this moment for decades. "The Galactic Council requires a full accounting of recent military actions," Zethkar began formally. "The destruction of the Zirian Collective has destabilized political relationships throughout known space. The Zirian Collective destabilized itself when it began enslaving our people," replied President Chen of the Asian Federation. "We simply restored balance through military force that appears to exceed anything in your official records." "Ambassador," interjected Prime Minister Okafor of the African Union, "what makes you think our official records represent our full capabilities?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zethkar realized that he was facing the same assumptions that had doomed the Zirian Collective. Everyone had believed they understood human capabilities because they had been shown carefully curated examples of human technology and strategy. "Perhaps," suggested Director Vasquez, "you would like to see some of our recent developments." The tour that followed shattered every assumption Zethkar had held about human civilization. In underground facilities that extended kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, he saw manufacturing complexes that could produce ships and weapons at rates that defied economic logic. The humans had automated their production so completely that they could build a battle fleet in the time it took most species to design a single vessel. In research laboratories hidden within mountain ranges, human scientists demonstrated technologies that seemed to violate physical laws. They showed him materials that became stronger when damaged, energy sources that drew power from quantum fluctuations, and weapons that could strike targets through dimensional barriers. But the most unsettling facility was the one they called the Strategy Center. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, thousands of human analysts worked with quantum computers to model and predict the behavior of every major species in the galaxy. They had detailed psychological profiles of political leaders, complete tactical assessments of military forces, and contingency plans for scenarios that ranged from diplomatic negotiations to total galactic war. "We've been preparing for this day since we first encountered galactic civilization," explained General Harrison, the facility's director. "We knew that eventually someone would test our resolve. We wanted to be ready." "Ready for what?" Zethkar asked. "To survive," Harrison replied simply. "Human history is a record of what happens when peaceful people meet aggressive neighbors. Usually, the peaceful people die. We decided to change that pattern." As they walked through the facility, Zethkar saw analysis stations dedicated to every major galactic power. The humans had been studying their allies and potential enemies with the same meticulous attention that most species reserve for their most critical military secrets. "This level of preparation," Zethkar said slowly, "suggests that you've been planning for galactic war for decades." "No, Ambassador," corrected Dr. Michael, Sarah Chen joining them from her own tour of the facility. "We've been planning to prevent galactic war. There's a difference." She led him to a massive display showing the current political situation across known space. In the 3 weeks since the Zirian incident, 17 aggressive species had announced voluntary reductions in their military expansion programs. 12 others had opened diplomatic channels with previously targeted worlds. 3 major slave trading operations had simply shut down without explanation. The Zirian Collective maintained galactic order through intimidation, Chen explained. Everyone knew they could destroy any opponent, so most conflicts ended before they began. We're offering the same service, but with a different approach. What approach? We make it clear that aggression has consequences. Not might have consequences someday if we decide to intervene, but will have immediate, devastating consequences that no military force can prevent or survive. Chen's expression was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing agricultural policy. The beauty of this system is that it only requires demonstration once per generation. Zethkar felt cold understanding wash over him. The Zerion Collective was your demonstration. They chose to make themselves an example. We simply accommodated their decision. Over the following days, Zethkar was given access to information that painted an even more unsettling picture of human capabilities. They had established monitoring stations throughout the galaxy using technology that remained undetectable to conventional sensors. They had infiltrated the communication networks of every major government, giving them real-time intelligence on political and military developments. Most disturbing of all, they had identified and catalogued every strategic weakness of every significant military force in known space. The humans weren't just prepared for war. They were prepared for every possible war, against every possible opponent. Why show me this? Zethkar asked during his final meeting with Director Vasquez. This information could destabilize the entire galactic community. Because someone needs to understand what has changed, Vasquez replied. The old order was built on fear and submission. Peaceful species paid tribute to aggressive ones to avoid destruction. That model failed. Humanity and countless other civilizations. And your model? Our model is simple. Aggressive species face immediate, overwhelming retaliation. Peaceful species are left alone to develop as they choose. The choice of which category to belong to rests entirely with each civilization. As his ship prepared to depart Earth, Zethkar realized that he was returning to a galaxy that no longer existed. The careful balance of power that had maintained stability for millennia had been shattered not by conquest or rebellion, but by the simple demonstration that even the strongest predator could become prey. The humans had given every species in the galaxy a choice: adapt to a new order based on peaceful coexistence, or discover what had happened to the Zerion Collective. Early reports suggested that most species were choosing adaptation, but as Zethkar looked back at the blue-green world growing smaller in the distance, he wondered if the galaxy truly understood what it was adapting to. The humans hadn't just introduced a new military power. They had introduced a species that approached civilization itself as a strategic problem to be solved, and they had solved it with the same methodical precision that had destroyed the most feared military force in galactic history. 6 months after Ambassador Zethkar's return from Earth, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy quiet that many mistook for peace. Trade routes that had been plagued by piracy for centuries now operated safely. Species that had spent millennia in territorial disputes were suddenly finding diplomatic solutions. The great military machines that had consumed countless resources seemed to be scaling back their operations. But beneath this apparent tranquility, older powers were beginning to stir. The Hegemony Defense Force, representing an alliance of 12 ancient species, had watched the rise of human influence with growing alarm. Unlike younger civilizations that had adapted quickly to the new order, the Hegemony remembered when they had ruled significant portions of the galaxy. They had surrendered that dominance gradually, ceding territory and influence to avoid the fate of the Zerion Collective, but they had not forgotten their former glory. Grand Marshal Thekvar, Supreme Commander of Hegemony Forces, stood before the assembled war council on the fortress world of Kethmorin. Around the circular chamber, representatives of species that had once been the galaxy's apex predators listened as he laid out a plan that would either restore their power or destroy them all. Fellow commanders, Thekvar began, his voice carrying the authority of a being who had conquered star systems before humans had achieved spaceflight. We face a crisis that threatens the fundamental order of galactic civilization. A single upstart species has appointed itself the arbiter of all conflicts, the judge of all aggressive actions. The assembled delegates stirred. General Voss of the Talon Imperium leaned forward, his cybernetic enhancements glowing with interest. Marshal, our intelligence suggests that human military capabilities far exceed anything we previously understood. The Zerion Collective. The Zerion Collective fell to surprise and superior technology, Thekvar interrupted. But surprise works only once and technology can be countered. What cannot be tolerated is the precedent humanity has established. If we accept their dominion now, we surrender our sovereignty forever. Admiral Corex of the Steel Worlds Alliance activated her personal display, showing current military assessments. Our combined fleets number over 8 million vessels. Our ground forces exceed 50 billion combat troops. The humans field perhaps 50,000 ships and negligible ground forces. The numerical advantage means nothing if we cannot engage their forces, interrupted Commander Zalfik of the Shadow Fleet. Human stealth technology remains beyond our ability to detect. They could be monitoring this meeting right now. Let them monitor, Thekvar declared. Let them understand that some species will not bow to their threats. We are offering them a choice: withdraw their expansion into our traditional territories, or face the combined might of civilizations that ruled the stars when Earth was nothing but primitive tribes. The plan that emerged from the War Council was elegant in its simplicity. The hegemony would not attack Earth directly. That would be suicidal. Instead, they would challenge human authority in a dozen systems simultaneously, forcing humanity to either back down or reveal the true extent of their capabilities. If humans proved unable to project power across such a wide area, the galaxy would understand that their influence had limits. 3 days later, hegemony fleets moved into action. The first target was the Altair system, where human colonists had established agricultural settlements on 3 worlds. The hegemony claimed ancient territorial rights and demanded immediate evacuation. Similar demands were made in 11 other systems, each backed by overwhelming military force. The human response came within hours, but it was not what the hegemony had expected. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's ambassador at large, appeared via quantum communication link in every targeted system simultaneously. Her message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship and station received it clearly. To the representatives of the Hegemony Defense Force, she began, her tone carrying the same professional courtesy she had used in the Galactic Council. We have received your territorial demands and note your military deployments. We appreciate your concerns about human expansion and would welcome the opportunity to address them through diplomatic channels. Grand Marshal Thekvar, monitoring the transmission from his flagship in the Altair system, felt a surge of satisfaction. The humans were backing down. However, Chen continued, we must clarify several misconceptions that appear to underlie your current actions. First, the systems you claim have been independently governed for over 2 centuries. Second, our presence in these systems exists at the invitation of their legitimate governments. Third, we do not recognize territorial claims based solely on historical precedent, particularly when such claims would result in the displacement of current inhabitants. The satisfaction began to fade from Thekvar's expression. Finally, Chen's voice hardened almost imperceptibly. We must remind all parties that human policy regarding military threats to our allies remains unchanged. Any attack on settlements under our protection will be met with immediate and decisive response. The transmission ended, leaving the hegemony fleets in position but facing an unexpected dilemma. They had expected either submission or immediate retaliation. Instead, they faced a diplomatic statement that neither yielded to their demands nor provided justification for attack. It's a bluff, declared Admiral Korax. They're buying time to position their forces. Then we'll call their bluff, Thekvar decided. All fleets prepare for coordinated strikes. If the humans want to protect 12 systems simultaneously, let them try. The attack began at 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time. Across 12 star systems, hegemony forces launched precision strikes against human installations. They targeted communications arrays, defense platforms, and supply depots. Military objectives that would cripple human operations without directly threatening civilian populations. For exactly 17 minutes, it appeared that the hegemony had achieved a stunning victory. Human installations throughout the affected systems went offline under concentrated bombardment. No human ships appeared to contest the attacks. No defensive fire met the advancing fleets. Then, space began to tear itself apart. The first sign of human response was the disappearance of the hegemony's scout ships. Advanced vessels equipped with the most sophisticated sensor arrays simply vanished from tactical displays without warning or distress signals. Within minutes, entire squadrons had gone dark across all 12 systems. Report! Thekvar demanded, as his tactical officer struggled with displays showing impossible readings. Marshal, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the target zones, but our sensors cannot locate their sources. The energy patterns suggest weapons fire, but the explanation ended as the retribution. A hegemony dreadnought in the Vega system simply ceased to exist. One moment it was coordinating the bombardment of human positions. The next, space held only expanding clouds of debris. Across the 12 battlefields, hegemony forces began reporting the same phenomenon. Ships were being destroyed by weapons that could not be detected, fired from platforms that remained invisible to every scanning technology in the known galaxy. But it was the pattern of destruction that truly terrified hegemony commanders. The humans weren't simply attacking random targets, they were systematically dismantling the hegemony fleets with a precision that spoke of complete tactical knowledge. Command ships died first, followed by sensor platforms, then weapon systems, then propulsion. Each fleet was being carefully dissected piece by piece. while remaining unable to strike back at an enemy they could not see. In the Altair system, Grand Marshal Thekvar watched his massive fleet of 3,000 vessels being reduced to scrap metal by an enemy that might have been ghosts. His tactical displays showed impossible readings, energy signatures that appeared for microseconds before vanishing, weapon impacts that seemed to come from empty space, and movement patterns that violated every law of physics he understood. All fleets, immediate withdrawal, he ordered, abandoning any pretense of tactical sophistication. Emergency hyperspace transition, all vessels. But retreat proved as impossible as advance. As hegemony ships attempted to escape, they found their hyperspace drives failing in sequence, not destroyed, simply offline, as if someone had surgically disabled specific systems without damaging anything else. The systematic destruction continued for another 8 minutes. When it ended, the 12 hegemony fleets had lost 73% of their vessels. The survivors hung in space, weapons offline, sensors blind, completely at the mercy of an enemy they had never seen. Then Dr. Chen's voice returned to the communication channels. Marshal Thekvar, we regret the necessity of this demonstration. As we stated previously, human policy regarding threats to our allies is non-negotiable. We trust that recent events have clarified any misunderstandings about our capabilities. Thekvar stared at his tactical displays, trying to comprehend what had happened. The greatest military alliance in the galaxy had been effortlessly defeated by forces that remained invisible even after the battle had ended. Your surviving vessels had been equipped with navigational assistance for return journeys to your home territories, Chen continued. We recommend that future territorial disputes be addressed through established diplomatic channels rather than military action. The Galactic Council stands ready to mediate any legitimate grievances. Where are you? Thekvar transmitted, his voice carrying desperation that shamed him. Show yourselves!
Marshal, we've been here the entire time.
Your forces simply lack the sensory capability to detect our presence. This is not a failing of your technology. Our stealth systems operate on principles that most galactic civilizations have not yet discovered. As if to emphasize the point, space around Thekvar's flagship began to shimmer, slowly, like a heat mirage fading. A massive human vessel materialized less than a kilometer away. It was larger than any ship in hegemony records, its hull covered in geometric patterns that seemed to bend light around them. More ships appeared throughout the battle zone, dozens of them in each system, all armed with weapons that defied classification.
They had been present from the beginning of the engagement, watching, waiting, prepared to defend the human colonies but hoping that wisdom would prevail.
Impressive technology, Thekvar admitted, his tactical mind already analyzing the implications.
Technology is only part of the equation, Marshal. The hegemony made the same mistake as the Zirian Collective. You assumed that military superiority was simply a matter of having more ships and bigger weapons. Human military doctrine recognizes that true superiority comes from making your enemy fight the battle you want them to fight. Over the following hours, hegemony commanders were given a brief demonstration of human tactical philosophy. They were shown recordings of the engagement from human perspectives, revealing how every move they had made had been anticipated and countered before they had even thought to make it. They learned that human ships had been monitoring their war councils, their tactical planning sessions, even their private communications, for months before the attack. You knew we were coming, Thekvar said finally. Marshal, we've known about every military action planned by every major power for the past 2 years. We don't interfere with internal conflicts or legitimate territorial disputes, but we monitor all activities that might threaten peaceful species. And if we had succeeded? If we had driven you from those systems, then you would have discovered that those colonies represented approximately 0.1% of human territorial holdings. We would have grieved the loss and begun planning your complete destruction. The words were delivered in the same diplomatic tone that Chen used for trade negotiations, but they carried a weight that made Thekvar understand the true scope of human patience. They had allowed the hegemony to attack, knowing they could prevent it, simply to demonstrate the futility of challenging their authority. As hegemony forces began their humiliating retreat to home territories, Thekvar found himself recalculating everything he thought he knew about galactic politics. The humans hadn't just defeated the hegemony militarily, they had done so while offering diplomatic alternatives, protecting non-combatants, and maintaining strict rules of engagement that minimized casualties even among their enemies. They had fought like apex predators while maintaining the moral high ground of defenders. It was a combination that no previous galactic power had managed to achieve. The aftermath of the hegemony's defeat sent ripples throughout known space. Within days, 7 major military alliances announced voluntary reductions in their offensive capabilities. 12 slave trading consortiums simply disbanded without explanation. The galactic arms market collapsed as species realized that conventional weapons were useless against human technology. But perhaps most significantly, applications for human protection agreements increased by 300%. Species that had spent millennia defending themselves suddenly found the prospect of human alliance more attractive than maintaining their own military forces. Ambassador Zethkar, monitoring these developments from his office on the galactic capital world, realized that he was witnessing the birth of a new type of empire. Not one built on conquest or intimidation, but on the simple recognition that humans had made warfare obsolete for anyone willing to live peacefully. The most dangerous thing about humans, he reflected, wasn't their technology or their tactical brilliance. It was their ability to make their enemies choose to surrender rather than face destruction. And most of the galaxy was choosing surrender. 2 years had passed since the hegemony's defeat, and the galaxy had adapted to its new reality with remarkable speed. Trade flourished along routes that had been war zones for centuries. Scientific collaboration reached unprecedented levels as species no longer feared sharing knowledge with potential enemies. Even the most militaristic civilizations had found ways to redirect their energies toward productive endeavors. But adaptation came with a price that few had anticipated. On Nexus Station, the galaxy's largest commercial hub, Ambassador Zethkar met with a delegation that would have been impossible to assemble just 3 years earlier. Representatives from 43 species sat around a conference table discussing economic integration with the kind of enthusiasm that had once been reserved for military conquest. The meeting's subject was the proposed Galactic Development Initiative, a human-sponsored program that promised to accelerate technological advancement across participating species by sharing selected human innovations. The benefits were staggering. Energy sources that could power entire star systems, transportation technology that made current hyperspace drives obsolete, manufacturing techniques that could end scarcity itself, all in exchange for accepting human oversight of military development. The terms are quite reasonable, explained Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the human coordinator for the initiative. Participating species retain complete autonomy over internal affairs, cultural development, and economic policy. The only restrictions apply to weapons research and military deployment. Senator Kelthar of the Regelian Confederacy leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting concern. Dr. Reyes, our species has maintained independent military forces for over 5,000 years. You're asking us to surrender that tradition. Senator, we're asking you to evolve beyond the need for it. Reyes replied gently. Human protection guarantees make independent military forces redundant. Why spend resources on weapons when those same resources could eliminate poverty, disease, and environmental degradation? Around the table, delegates exchanged glances that carried decades of accumulated fear. The logic was undeniable. Human military superiority made conventional armed forces obsolete. But the implications reached far beyond simple disarmament. Zethkar had spent months researching the societal changes that accompanied human protection agreements. Species that accepted human oversight experienced rapid technological advancement and unprecedented prosperity. But they also underwent subtle cultural shifts that concerned many traditional leaders. The Althorian Empire, one of the first to sign a protection agreement, had transformed from a rigid military hierarchy into a collaborative democracy within 2 years. The change appeared voluntary. Human advisors had simply suggested more efficient forms of governance, and Althorian leaders had gradually adopted them. The results were impressive. Increased productivity, higher living standards, and elimination of internal conflicts that had plagued their society for generations. But critics argued that the Althorians had lost something fundamental in the process. Their warrior traditions had withered as military careers became obsolete. Their competitive spirit had been channeled into economic development, but many felt they had sacrificed their identity in exchange for prosperity. Dr. Reyes, said Commander Vexnall of the Draconian Republic, what happens to species that decline your protection agreement? Are they excluded from galactic commerce? Not at all, Commander. Non-participating species remain free to engage in trade and diplomacy as they always have. However, they cannot expect human intervention if their military activities threaten peaceful neighbors. The unstated implication was clear. Species that maintained significant military forces would find themselves increasingly isolated as their neighbors opted for human protection. Economic pressure would eventually force compliance with the new order. Zethkar recognized the pattern from his historical studies. It was conquest by consent, The gradual absorption of independent powers through a combination of superior benefits and subtle coercion, but it was conquest that genuinely improved the lives of conquered populations, making resistance seem both futile and foolish. There is one concern, Admiral Thrace of the Centauri Alliance said carefully, about the long-term implications of this arrangement. If humanity provides protection for the entire galaxy, what prevents them from simply dictating terms to the species they protect? Dr. Reyes smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Admiral, that question assumes that humans desire to rule other species. Our history suggests otherwise. We've had opportunities to establish direct control over dozens of worlds, but we've consistently chosen to support local governance instead. Your history is quite brief compared to most galactic civilizations, pointed out Delegate Mordek of the Ancient Worlds Consortium. How can we be certain that human policies won't change as your power grows? You can't, Reyes admitted. But consider the alternatives. Before human intervention, galactic civilization was characterized by constant warfare, exploitation of weaker species, and technological stagnation caused by military spending. Our system isn't perfect, but it's demonstrably better than what came before. As the meeting continued, Zethkar found himself studying the human delegation with new understanding. They weren't conquerors in any traditional sense. They were gardeners, cultivating a galaxy-wide civilization according to their vision of optimal development. The fact that their vision appeared to be genuinely beneficial didn't change the fundamental reality that it was imposed from outside. During a break in the proceedings, Zethkar approached Dr. Reyes privately. Doctor, may I ask a personal question? Of course, Ambassador. Do you believe that humanity has the right to reshape galactic civilization according to your values?
Reyes considered the question carefully.
Ambassador, I believe that humans have the responsibility to use our capabilities in ways that reduce suffering and promote flourishing. If other species develop better solutions, we'll gladly adopt them. But until that happens, we're not willing to watch peaceful civilizations suffer while we have the power to help them. And if some species prefer their traditional ways, even if those ways involve warfare and exploitation, then they're free to practice those traditions in isolation from species that have chosen differently. But they're not free to impose their traditions on others. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Galactic Communication Network. Reports were coming in from the Outer Rim territories. The Savage Clans, a coalition of predatory species that had refused all diplomatic contact with the galactic community, were launching coordinated attacks on human-protected worlds. The Savage Clans represented everything that the old Galactic Order had failed to address. They were nomadic warriors who survived by raiding more advanced civilizations, taking what they needed and destroying what they couldn't use. For millennia, they had been a constant threat that forced peaceful species to maintain expensive military defenses. The human response was swift and decisive. Within hours, quantum communications brought reports from the attack sites. The Savage Clan's massive fleets had been intercepted before they could reach their targets. But instead of the complete destruction that had befallen the Zirian Collective and the Hegemony, something different had occurred. All clan vessels have been disabled rather than destroyed, reported Admiral Hendricks via secure channel. We're taking approximately 2 million prisoners. The number was staggering. The entire military population of the Savage Clans, captured in a single coordinated operation. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated the evolution of human strategy. Instead of executing or imprisoning their captives, the humans began what they called cultural rehabilitation. Clan warriors were introduced to educational programs designed to help them understand the benefits of peaceful civilization. They were shown worlds where former warriors had found purpose in exploration, research, and creative endeavors. They were offered the chance to contribute to society in ways that utilized their skills without harming others. The program's success rate was remarkable. Within months, 60% of captured clan members had requested permanent resettlement in human-protected territories. They became explorers, pushing the boundaries of known space. They became researchers, applying their survival skills to solving environmental challenges. Some even became teachers, sharing their knowledge of resource management and tactical thinking in constructive ways. But the cultural rehabilitation program raised questions that made many galactic leaders uncomfortable. If humans could transform the most aggressive warrior culture in the galaxy into productive citizens, what did that say about the nature of identity and cultural autonomy? They're rewriting the fundamental psychology of entire species, worried Senator Drakmore of the Traditional Values Alliance. Today it's the Savage Clans, tomorrow it could be any of us. The clans volunteered for the program, Dr. Reyes pointed out during emergency council sessions. We're not forcing change on anyone. We're simply offering alternatives to violence and showing people that those alternatives can be more fulfilling than warfare. But critics argued that the distinction between choice and coercion became meaningless when one option led to prosperity and the other to destruction. Humans had created a system where peaceful species thrived while aggressive ones faced overwhelming military defeat followed by cultural transformation. Ambassador Zethkar found himself at the center of these debates, serving as a mediator between species that embraced human leadership and those that feared it. His unique position, trusted by both humans and traditional galactic powers, made him a crucial voice in discussions about the future of galactic civilization. The question isn't whether humans are benevolent, he told the Emergency Council session. The evidence suggests that they genuinely want what's best for galactic civilization. The question is whether any single species should have the power to define what best means for everyone else. The debate raged for months as more species faced the choice between accepting human protection and maintaining their independence. Each month brought new innovations from human-protected territories, medical breakthroughs that extended lifespans across species, energy technologies that made resource conflicts obsolete, and social programs that eliminated poverty and crime. But each month also brought reports of traditional societies slowly transforming under human influence. Warrior cultures becoming explorer cultures, hierarchical governments becoming democratic, competitive societies becoming collaborative. The changes were voluntary, beneficial, and apparently irreversible. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, addressed these concerns during a special session dedicated to the future of galactic governance. Fellow representatives, she began, we understand the concerns about human influence on galactic development, but consider the alternative. For millennia, galactic civilization has been shaped by the strongest military forces, the most ruthless exploitation, and the most effective intimidation. We're offering a different model, one based on protection of the weak, cooperation between species, and development of potential rather than suppression of competition. But Ambassador, interrupted Delegate Velta of the Independent Worlds League, your model assumes that all species will voluntarily accept human values. What about civilizations that find meaning in competition, struggle, and individual achievement? They're welcome to pursue those values, Chen replied. We simply ask that they do so without harming others. Competition can drive innovation rather than conquest. Struggle can overcome environmental challenges rather than creating them. Individual achievement can contribute to collective prosperity rather than coming at others' expense. As the debate continued, Zethkar realized that he was witnessing the birth of the first truly stable galactic civilization in recorded history. It wasn't perfect, no civilization could be, but it was sustainable in ways that the old order had never been. The price of this stability was the gradual transformation of every species into something that resembled human social organization. Not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple demonstration that human ways of organizing society produced better results than any alternative. Whether this transformation represented evolution or extinction remained to be seen. But as Zethkar looked around the council chambers at representatives who spoke of cooperation rather than domination, of development rather than exploitation, he couldn't deny that the galaxy had become a better place. The question that haunted his dreams was whether it was still recognizably the same galaxy at all. 5 years after the first human demonstration of military supremacy, Ambassador Zethkar stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching ships from 100 different species dock and depart in perfect coordination. The massive space station, built through a collaboration between humans and 47 allied species, represented everything that the new galactic order had achieved, and everything it had cost. The statistics were impressive by any measure. Galactic trade had increased by 4,000%. Scientific advancement had accelerated beyond historical precedent, with breakthrough discoveries occurring monthly rather than yearly. Warfare between civilized species had ended completely. Poverty, disease, and resource scarcity were becoming historical footnotes rather than daily realities. But as Zethkar watched a delegation of former Savage Clan warriors teaching sustainable agriculture techniques to newly contacted species, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had been lost in humanity's garden of galactic peace.
Impressive, isn't it, Doctor?
Sarah Chen joined him at the observation window, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had lived to see her life's work succeed beyond all expectations.
Undeniably, Zethkar replied.
Your species has accomplished something that political theorists thought impossible: stable peace across an entire galaxy. Our species, Chen corrected gently, This was built by every civilization that chose cooperation over conquest. Humans simply provided the initial framework. Zethkar considered her words as they watched a massive construction project taking shape in the distance. A research station, designed to explore technologies that might eventually allow expansion beyond their current galaxy. It was staffed by volunteers from dozens of species, all working toward goals that would benefit everyone. Dr. Weech, Chen, may I ask you something that's been troubling me for years? Of course, Ambassador. Whoa. Did you plan all of this from the beginning? The transformation of galactic civilization, the elimination of military competition, the gradual adoption of human social organization across all allied species. Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching ships navigate through traffic patterns that would have been impossible without the level of cooperation that human protection had fostered. Ambassador, when humans first encountered galactic civilization, we spent decades studying your history, your politics, your military conflicts. We saw patterns that suggested galactic civilization was trapped in cycles that prevented genuine development. Species spent so much energy defending themselves that they had little left for growth. So you decided to break the cycle. We decided to offer an alternative, but we couldn't predict how enthusiastically that alternative would be embraced. Chen gestured toward the busy docking bays. 3 years ago, we thought we might protect 50 or 60 worlds. Instead, we're protecting nearly 6,000 star systems across 800 species. The numbers represented the scope of humanity's accidental empire. Nearly 90% of known galactic civilization now existed under human protection agreements. The remaining independent species either lived in carefully monitored isolation or were gradually moving toward protection agreements as their neighbors demonstrated the benefits of human alliance. What about resistance? Zethkar asked. Surely some species object to human influence. Fewer than you might think. The Independent Coalition maintains military forces and refuses our protection agreements, but they've never been aggressive toward protected species. The isolationist enclaves want nothing to do with any galactic civilization, human or otherwise. Both groups seem content with their choices. And the species that have joined your protection network, how do they view the changes in their own societies? Chen activated a personal display showing survey results from across human-protected space. The data painted a picture of unprecedented satisfaction with government, social organization, and quality of life. But Zethkar noted subtle patterns in the responses that suggested something more complex than simple contentment. Interesting, he murmured, studying the psychological profiles. Satisfaction levels are highest among younger generations, while older individuals show more ambivalence about social changes. Natural resistance to change, Chen explained. Older individuals grew up in societies organized around competition and conflict. Younger people have only known cooperation and mutual support. The transition is generational. But Zethkar saw something else in the data. Evidence that human social organization wasn't just being adopted, it was becoming the only model that younger generations could imagine. Within a few more decades, species that had maintained distinct cultural identities for millennia would be indistinguishable from extended human communities. Dr. Chen, what happens when there are no more independent species? When every civilization in the galaxy operates according to human social principles? Then we'll have achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly unified civilization capable of taking on challenges that no individual species could handle alone. As if to emphasize her point, Chen directed his attention to another display showing current research projects. Humans and their allies were working together on problems that ranged from communication with entirely alien forms of intelligence to the development of technologies that could support civilization across multiple galaxies. The scale of cooperation required for such projects would have been impossible under the old system of competing military powers. But, Zethkar pressed, won't that unified civilization essentially be human civilization expanded to galactic scale? Chen considered this carefully. Ambassador, human civilization itself has been shaped by contact with galactic species. We've adopted technologies, social innovations, and philosophical perspectives from dozens of different worlds. The civilization that's emerging isn't purely human. It's a synthesis of the best elements from every contributing culture. Over the following days, Zethkar conducted his own investigation into the nature of this emerging galactic civilization. He visited worlds that had been under human protection for years, interviewed leaders from dozens of species, and observed social developments that would have been impossible under the old order. What he found was simultaneously encouraging and disturbing. Species that had been locked in territorial conflicts for centuries were collaborating on joint colonization efforts. civilizations that had viewed each other as existential threats were sharing their most advanced technologies freely. The level of trust and cooperation was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. But he also found evidence of homogenization that troubled him. Young people from different species, increasingly dressed alike, pursued similar careers and held remarkably similar values. The diversity that had once characterized galactic civilization was slowly giving way to something that looked like cultural convergence. On Altau Prime, he interviewed Dr. Velnara, a philosopher from the crystalline Gelnari species, who had become one of the most prominent critics of cultural homogenization. "Ambassador," she said, her crystalline form resonating with harmonics that conveyed deep concern. "We're witnessing the death of diversity itself. Not through conquest or oppression, but through the gradual demonstration that human social organization is superior to all alternatives." "But surely you can't argue with the results," Zethkar pointed out. "Crime has virtually disappeared from Gelnari worlds. Your people live longer, healthier lives. Scientific advancement has accelerated beyond anything your species achieved independently." "All true," Belnar admitted. "But at what cost?" Zellanari society was based on harmonic competition, individuals and groups striving to create more beautiful, more complex resonances than their peers. That competition drove our artistic and scientific advancement for millennia. Now our young people collaborate on everything, seeking consensus rather than excellence. Is consensus necessarily inferior to competition? For my species, yes. We evolved as individual crystalline entities that became more complex through competitive resonance. Human social organization assumes that all species benefit from cooperation and mutual support, but that assumption may be fundamentally wrong for beings like us. Similar concerns were being raised across human-protected space. The Draconian Republic worried that their warrior traditions were being lost as younger generations chose careers in exploration and research. The Centauri Alliance feared that their democratic institutions were becoming obsolete as human-style consensus building proved more efficient. Even species that benefited dramatically from human protection expressed anxiety about the loss of their distinctive characteristics. But when Zethkar presented these concerns to human leadership, he received responses that revealed the depth of their conviction about the path they had chosen. "Ambassador," explained Admiral Martinez during a private meeting on Earth, "we understand the concerns about cultural homogenization. But consider the alternative. The old galactic order preserved diversity through isolation and conflict. Species maintained their unique characteristics by fighting to prevent other species from influencing them. That conflict also drove innovation and adaptation. Through suffering and death," Martinez replied. "Human military doctrine is based on the principle that the best victory is the one that doesn't require fight. We've extended that principle to civilization itself. The best cultural development is the one that doesn't require conflict. But Admiral, what if conflict and competition are essential to some forms of development? What if peace and cooperation actually limit the potential of certain species?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Then those species are welcome to pursue conflict and competition among themselves, as long as they don't impose those choices on others. The independent coalition maintains traditional competitive structures. The isolationist enclaves preserve their original cultures completely. Choice still exists. But social pressure makes those choices increasingly difficult to maintain."
"Ambassador, social pressure has always shaped cultural development."
"The difference now is that the pressure encourages cooperation rather than domination. Is that really a loss?" As his investigation continued, Zethkar began to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history: the emergence of a truly post-conflict civilization. Not because conflict had been eliminated by force, but because alternatives to conflict had been made so attractive that most species chose them voluntarily. The question was whether a post-conflict civilization could maintain the dynamism and innovation that had traditionally been driven by competition and struggle. Early evidence suggested that it could. Scientific advancement was accelerating, artistic expression was flourishing, and exploration was expanding at unprecedented rates. But the civilization emerging from human influence was undeniably different from anything that had existed before. It was optimized for stability, cooperation, and mutual benefit rather than for competition, achievement, and individual excellence. During his final meeting with Dr. Chen before returning to the galactic capital, Zethkar posed the question that had been troubling him throughout his investigation. "Dr. Chen, humanity has succeeded in creating something that political theorists thought impossible: a stable, peaceful, prosperous galactic civilization. But is it still a civilization that includes genuine diversity, Or have you simply created a human civilization on a galactic scale? Chen considered the question with the careful attention she had always given to complex problems.
Ambassador, that may be the wrong question.
Instead of asking whether we've created human civilization on a galactic scale, perhaps we should ask whether we've created the first genuinely galactic civilization, one that transcends the limitations of individual species.
The distinction being, human civilization itself was shaped by conflict, competition, and struggle.
The civilization emerging now has been shaped by cooperation, mutual support, and shared purpose. It may be more human than anything else that exists, but it's also more than human in ways that humans could never have achieved alone. As Zefkar prepared to depart Earth for what he suspected might be the last time, he realized that his investigation had answered some questions while raising others that might never be resolved.
Humanity had succeeded in their goal of creating a stable galactic civilization, but in doing so they had fundamentally changed the nature of what it meant to be civilized. Whether that change represented evolution or extinction remained to be seen.
But as his ship departed Earth's solar system, carrying reports that would influence galactic policy for generations to come, Zefkar couldn't deny that the galaxy had become something unprecedented, a place where different species could coexist without fear, where resources could be shared without conflict, and where the future could be planned beyond the next military crisis. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of galactic civilization had begun, and at the center of it all, humans continued to insist that they were just gardeners, tending a galaxy-wide garden that happened to have grown far beyond anyone's original expectations. History would judge whether they were right.